Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of SaaS District. This is your host Akil Jabbar, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about how to manage uncertainty during a crisis with your startup, such as what's going on in the world today with the COVID-19 virus. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is Arvind Jha. Arvind is the director and co founder of Pariksha Labs, a software consulting and development company working with startups all over the world. Arvind is also the founder of Partee Hai, a lead generation platform and marketplace for party services. He's also the founder of a cloud video startup, Movico, which is India's leading video asset management company. Arvind has also built and led large software R&D teams for major global players in the world in delivering leading products. His specialty has been in conceptualizing innovative new products and building businesses from scratch. He now mentors tech startups all over India. And finally, I describe him as a startup evangelist, advisor, mentor, and investor for over 10 tech companies, including a notable exit from one company called Signal. So hopefully that was a good introduction. Welcome in, Arvind. I'm glad to have you on today's show. And hopefully you can give a better introduction than me, just in a couple lines.
Hey, thanks, Akil. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm so excited to talk to people in Mexico.
Yeah, no worries. So maybe if you could just tell us a little bit of kind of your background, how you got to where you are today, just so people know who you are.
Sure. Thanks so much. So I spent about 20 years with tech companies, mostly US companies. I worked for Apple. I worked for Adobe. I worked for Polaroid. And mostly I was on the engineering side. I became a director of engineering and built a lot of products that Adobe has, for example, Photoshop and PageMaker and FileMaker, Premiere and stuff like that. And then I got involved. Always I was interested in the business side of things. So I thought maybe we should try some business development. I got involved with sales at Adobe as Adobe was trying to take PDF platform into the enterprise. And I ran a little small sales team for about a year. And that led to starting my own companies or move to a founder role. And I set up Movico to try and build a video asset management on the cloud. It was a little early. 2008 was a bad time to do startups anyway. But then we had to pivot very quickly to more of a product outsourcing type of business, helping other companies build products. And we launched many products for global customers in US, in Switzerland, in Australia. And I was always fascinated by marketing and digital marketing. And I got a chance, one of my friends joined politics, and I got a chance to go run a large political campaign and see if some of the ideas around digital marketing, targeting, messaging could be applied to politics. So I spent some time looking at that. And then I came back to my first love, which is products. And as kind of would have it, a lot of action happening on product side, B2B SaaS in India. So I decided to be more of an investor and mentor and work with companies and build up an ecosystem. And now we have about 50 plus companies in my cohort in Delhi area, which are doing all kinds of different SaaS. So that's a little background of where I am coming from.
Very cool. And what would you say is your take on the current environment of the SaaS industry, whether specifically in India or elsewhere in the world? Where are we headed?
I I think we are in a big bull run. Maybe a 10-year bull market for SaaS, especially B2B SaaS. I have seen a lot of investments go into Indian SaaS in the last year or so. Most of the big VCs are now focused on SaaS as opposed to marketplaces because the cost of acquiring customers in the marketplaces and the profitability is so far away. Whereas in SaaS, the profitability seems much more recent and much more near term. I've also seen large companies start to acquire small startups in India. So I think even globally, we've seen a lot of interest in SaaS companies. And I think now with this COVID situation, as we see more adoption of cloud, and I see more adoption of collaboration and IT being the savior in many senses, we will see much more of SaaS adoption, both across large enterprises as well as across SMEs or small medium enterprises. So I'm very bullish on SaaS and the ecosystem worldwide.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I see it's just growing tremendously. I don't think there hasn't been a slowdown yet. Um, but I'm kind of curious, when we talk about, the COVID-19 virus, I know you're speaking with as an advisor with some of the startups in your portfolio. What's kind of the strategy or plan that what are the conversations you're having both, let's say, on a short-term basis, on a mid-term basis, and long-term basis, on how to kind of plan with the kind of uncertainty that's it's around us.
Yeah, we are all trying to figure out what's the right way to handle this. But what we did was, um, we knew that the demand would fall down the curve or fall off the cliff very, very quickly. So we kind of did a little estimate of what are the segments or sectors where demand would really go near zero, and it has gone to near zero in many segments. And therefore, what should we do to help those customers? Maybe delay our payments with them, or maybe offer them more services so that they could remember us, that we stood by them when they needed to. But there were a couple of other segments which were kind of going up. So telecommunications, for example, was going up. Web security was going up. Anything to do with digital workflows and collaboration, work from home, that was going up. So I think the first thing we told all our companies that we advise is be very, very greedy with cash, hoard cash. Cash is going to be the oxygen. We don't know how long this is going to be. We don't know when the demand is going to come back. So let's figure out, everything that we can strip away in terms of unnecessary spends. Let's go very lean and mean on that. And then let's try to defer and delay as much as possible on the payment side, because we are going to get hit on the collection side. And we've seen that now 3 or 4 weeks now. India has been in lockdown for 4 weeks. Pretty much all the payments are getting delayed or deferred, or requests coming saying, can we do it later? So cash has been the most important thing. And then of course you have to take care of your employees and make sure that their concerns and their uncertainties are handled. So over communicate with the employees, make them part of our planning. Many of the employees actually stepped up and said, we are also home. We are not going to spend a lot of discretionary spends. So maybe we can take a salary cut and let's survive this phase out. That was very supportive of them. So we did something of that, and then make sure that we were doing a lot of communication with our key customers so that customers knew that we would stand by them in this hour of their need. I think if you show that empathy across customer segment, across employee segments, and across partners, then I think you have some good chance of surviving. But of course, it depends so much on how much cash you have and what kind of leverage you have in the market. So still tough times, but yeah, those are the immediate things that we did. And then we have a plan set up, which is more of a short-term plan and a long-term plan. We think people are still reacting to this, disaster that has hit all of the globe. But now I think as people have stabilized and there are 4 weeks or 5 weeks of lockdown, they started to look at, okay, what next? How do we really rebuild? What are the options for us to rebuild? And we are reaching out to customers and saying, okay, as you think about your options, we are here to help you. So that's the kind of approach that we've taken. We have trigger points set up saying, okay, if we hit this trigger point, then we go into another damage control mode. But we are also looking at, what kind of new business opportunities, the new world will look like. So where is the new collaboration? What's going to happen on the video conferencing side? What's going to happen on the cloud side? And try to see if we could, predict, or we could take advantage of the disruption or the opportunity that is presenting itself.
So on that note of the trigger points, so just trying to think of an exercise here for people who are looking to set up their own plan, or maybe they already have their plan. What is it? Would you say are like your main trigger points? Would you say is it revenue, churn? What is like the numbers you're looking at that if A happens we do B, if A B C happens we do C, etc. What is kind of that look like?
Yeah, I think the first point was revenue. So we thought, look, I think what is going to happen is new revenue, new customer acquisition is definitely going to drop. So what kind of level it should drop, and then what are the impact analysis for us? What should we do? Um, then there might be some churn delays. So we might expect some churn, a higher churn. And then of course some renewals will get delayed as well. So all the revenue impact points, we kind of put multiple points saying if our overall revenue goes down 15% or 20% or 30% or 40%, what are the different actions we would need to take to make sure that we are still healthy and we can still take care of the operating costs and expenses and not completely kill our balance sheets. And those are the things that we kind of worried about. And then as you do that financial planning, you have to see the impact on people. So how softly you can kind of do that, and how transparently you can do that, and how you can empathize with their needs as well and bring them into the decision process. So started with the top leadership and said, okay, these are the trigger points, and everybody bought into that, and I think it's going off okay so far.
Yeah, it's really interesting how with everybody being affected in this moment and everybody feeling the pain. that people are starting to come together and they buy into kind of your whatever kind of decision you make. And I feel like it's a lot easier to get that collective decision. I know for one of our companies, we're kind of on, hey, do we let go, 5 people on the team, who maybe, we might not need, and then, maybe, or reduce their hours. Or we brought up the idea of, kind of doing a collective where everybody took kind of a pay cut and, took the damage for, took a bullet for the team across the board. And it seemed that everybody was leading, and that's what we ended up doing, was everybody was on board for, looking out for the greater good, versus people losing their jobs, right? So that was really nice to see, and I'm glad that people are doing that. I don't know how you guys are seeing that, but it feels like that's kind of the emotion everybody's going through.
Same here, same here. I think adversity brings out this cohesion and unity, and I think the purpose for everybody is a shared purpose right now, which is to ride out this phase and ride out this storm somehow, and then see how do we go from there. So I think there is good interest, or let's say enthusiasm of people to say, look, I'm part of making a decision. I know that these guys are also getting affected, but as long as they are being honest and transparent with me, I will accept that decision.
Exactly. So it's all yeah, it's what it is, right? Being transparent and honest. Now, in terms of challenges, like, what are some of the main challenges you're currently seeing in the industry? Let's call it, SaaS in general. Obviously, you're very bullish, but what are some things that could kind of put a stake in that?
I would say there are, I think of it as two kind of different segments or different balloons for challenges. If you are selling to mostly small and medium enterprises, and the challenges of discoverability, making sure that, you can get in front of them, and making sure that, your churn rates are a little low, making sure that you have a great onboarding experience so they can try it out quickly and get the value of the product in as quick a time as possible, making sure that, your communication with respect to onboarding emails is correct, and the product has got enough metering so you can analyze, how they're using it, what's the first experience looking like, and whether they're happy or satisfied within a short period of use, because the SMEs would like to kind of quickly see and test out and check out and say, hey, does this product meet my needs or not? With enterprises, it's more of trying to find the right customer, and sometimes the right teams of customers who will buy. So it's mostly a collaborative buying process with them, and the sales cycle could be long. In India, we have some special kind of problems that maybe Mexico is the same, that most of the SMEs are not very IT savvy. So the IT adoption for SMEs is still very low, 10%, 12% kind of range. They don't use a lot of cloud-based tools, and they're paying for that right now, because now with on-premise gone, offices being shut down, they have to scramble to kind of quickly get into workflows and collaboration. The other is it's a low cost economy. So, the pricing has to be very, very low. And the low pricing only works if you have a large volume, but we are still to reach those large volumes because of the challenges of adoption. So I think there's like interesting challenges. Some people have done well. Many people have shifted their focus to global markets from India. But I somehow believe that the big market is in India for the Indian SaaS companies. So we all have to figure out, and it's a learning process. Um, One of these days, maybe some disruption like COVID will happen, where everybody will start looking at, okay, now I definitely need a CRM, I definitely need an expense management, I definitely need an HR management. I need to make sure that all my business processes are online, so that we cannot be disrupted anymore. And once that happens, then we'll see a major adoption of SaaS products in India for sure.
Okay, so it's more of a educational issue at this point. You would say is just getting the people to understand how it works, why they should adopt it, and basically just living up to this is where the world is today, and this is where we should maybe move to the next step, and adding that kind of seed in their mind that we should start looking at other solutions out there, right? Instead of sticking to what
Sure. I
works in
mean,
the past. Yeah.
there are challenges with our founders as well. Many of the founders are tech founders. They don't know marketing well. They don't know how to communicate the story well. They're bootstrapped, so they have limited resources in terms of being able to get out there and market themselves. We don't have so many ecosystem platforms. We are dominated by the IT outsourcing big boys, billion-dollar companies. So they don't really think so much about small revenue of SaaS companies. There's also a large e-commerce marketplace or digital consumer marketplace companies. They're also not really looking at small SaaS companies. So the voice of the smaller SaaS companies is not maybe heard or not echoing at the right level. But I think in the last 15, 18 months, I've seen that trend change, and people are now looking at SaaS in a pretty big way.
Okay. No, so you speak. I know you work with a lot of like early stage, seed stage, maybe early angel round companies and startups. Where do you suggest these founders to focus their energy, their like you said, they might be very tech focused to gain that initial traction. So either you're taking on advisory, I know you work as a mentorship role or even as an investor role. What does that conversation look like for making sure they're focused in the right direction?
Great question. So I think, our first focus is to try to validate the product market fit assumptions that they have. Make sure that they have defined an ideal customer profile that they can kind of articulate out. They can define the key value propositions or value market fit propositions for those customers. And then they can demonstrate that, even some of the early customers that they may have had are experiencing that value proposition, that, they have either a good marketing engine or a good sales engine in place so that this can be scaled up over time. And if they don't have, then they have to design certain experiments and run certain experiments to figure out where the product market fit lies, where the market value market fit lies. And it could be a little adjacent or it could be completely orthogonal to where you started from. So depending on what stage we are in and what are the targets that these early stage companies have. There was an enterprise level company that was doing competitive analysis for large companies, for example. And there the approach was completely different in terms of going and identifying a group of people, pretty much like an ABM type of experiment, to go and find initial customers and make sure that you educate them, inform them, do demos, work with them over a 3-5 month period of time to go and get some early customers. And then there are other smaller SME kind of $10 or $12 a month user kind of deals, where it's just about seeing, okay, where is the velocity going to come from? Is it going to be advertising driven? Is it going to be mostly search driven? And then once the customer comes in, what kind of churn numbers you're seeing, what kind of, what are the initial steps of adoption that the customer is doing? What is the depth that the product exposure, they can do within the first 10 days? Where is that aha moment, that we talk about, saying, okay, if you cross that depth of product usage, then most likely you're going to be a long-term customer. So a lot of those experiments. And I think the experiments really are about telling the story, making sure the consumer, the content that people come up with is right, targeted to the right people. And then there's enough metering or analytics that they're spending time on to figure out what's going to work. And those are some of the things that we try with very early stage companies.
And how does that experiment change when you're saying where they should focus on operating when, say, like they have a tight budget, meaning they're pre-investment versus post-investment when they have money to fuel growth. So you're bootstrapped, you don't have money. What are you focusing on, and how do the experiment looks like? And then after you get some money, how does that change, right? Because I know mentally it changes how you approach it as well.
Yeah, great question again. So if you have a tight budget, then you can't make too many mistakes. You got to make sure that you're right more times than you're wrong. So one of the ways that you could do that is to look at more data and spend more time looking at the early data that comes in. Look at your campaigns to see what keywords are working, who's responding, why they're responding. Study the customer, talk to the customer to see what happened. Even if you lose signups or customers churn, to be able to understand what went wrong, why they didn't go ahead with the trials that they were going to go ahead with. The customers can teach you exactly where you're going wrong, and then basically leverage whatever expertise you can leverage from other people who are also targeting the same customers. So you have an ecosystem or a help network that can tell you what to do, and then finally at the end of the day, the founder has to make some calls. And if you make some good calls, then you are more successful. If you make some bad calls, then you're out of money. So you have to worry about that as well. So don't make too many mistakes. I think once you got the money, and I think most of the people who are raising money in India early stage are raising small amounts of money, between $500,000 to $2 million is common to see here. I think what we tell them is that instead of spending that money in going and hiring a good team, big team, and hiring salespeople right away, first get to a point where there is a demonstrable sales engine in place. So if you can show that there is a pipeline that you are on top of, there is a ideal customer profile that you know very well, and that there is a salesperson on the team, actual salesperson on the team who knows how to sell, then you should go out and figure out how to scale this out. If you've not done that, then first let's go and find that person, rather than go and spend the money in big budget advertising or big budget campaigns, they may not work. Okay, so it's about making sure that you got the right flywheel in place before you kind of make the flywheel a little bigger, and then you have the right organization in place to be able to handle whatever inquiries are coming in. Are you set up for customer success? Do you know that large customers will need a lot of support? Do you have the right team in place? So should you be spending more time hiring customer support people or success people, or should you be spending more time going and building a larger sales team? So some of those things then start to happen to kind of the mid stage. And I think, once you cross that stage, then you are ready to really scale this out in a big way. Look for partnerships, look for international exposure, international expansion, and stuff like that.
Makes sense. And I know speaking about sales, like, you said, a lot of the founders are more kind of, tech focused. That's kind of where their experience is. Obviously you don't expect them to do sales, but that's probably the most important part at, from the MVP stage to validate your business. Do you suggest they, find a founder or co-founder who can complement them, or, just see if they can afford hiring kind of a full-time salesperson to drive the sales for the initial sales anyways?
So my preference is to kind of coach the founder and cajole the founder a little bit into taking on the sales cycle and say, look, if you now become a founder, you are a salesperson. So, you are the best salesperson. You have the idea, you have the product, the product really well. You are the person to go and talk about it. And the passion that you have for the product will come through when the customer is with you. So the customer will buy this product, not because the product is so well rated, but because he likes you. I mean, he likes your passion and he thinks that you can do something good for him. But some founders still don't get that. They're still reticent and they will not go out and comfortable in their own skin. So if they have the money, then yeah, sure, go and hire a good sales guy who's sold before to the same type of people that you are trying to sell to, who has a track record of having sold and who can complement your team. And if you can find that, great. If you can't, then you will struggle.
Makes sense. And previously you ran enterprise level sales, right, with Adobe. Can you share some of your experience or learnings of what what the success looked like that for you, and what was successful as a enterprise level sales?
Sure, it was a good experiment. The hypothesis that I had at that point of time is like, basically I heard that our CEO had gone to one of the large four consulting companies, and they wanted $1 million to basically run a pilot or a proof of concept before they tell us what to do or not. And I knew that some of the largest IT outsourcing companies were in India, and they were serving pretty much all our target markets, all the insurance, banking, financial services companies. Most of the Indian companies were targeting them, and they were hungry for global exposure and moving into more high value added. So we kind of floated an idea. I floated an idea saying, look, let's use the Indian SIs as opposed to going through the top level hierarchy, because there you are insignificant player. For the SIs, you are still a big partner. And what turned out was that most of the SIs that we went to, they set up 10 to 20 man, pilot or proof of concept or centers of expertise at their money for us. And suddenly we were able to scale out a lot many experiments, lot many prototypes, lot many demos, and we had access to a large number of customers through them. So that became a really successful thing, and I was one of the top salesmen within the 1 year of moving from a pure engineering role into a sales guy role. It was very exciting for me to learn, what the customers think about in Europe, in US, in Australia, and the rest of the world. I loved it, completely loved it.
Yeah, I know how powerful strategic partnerships could be, right? I mean, you can try to knock on every single door, or you can find one massive kind of blue whale, and they just open up the door for everything else.
Absolutely. If one of the partners called, I would jump up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of curious now, kind of switching gears on the investment side. So like at Horizon Capital, we have very kind of strict metrics we look at. Okay, this is the size of the business, is the churn, this is the type of business. We have our kind of investment thesis pretty well defined. I know with seed or angel round investment, it's a little bit trickier because it's more kind of an art, and you're looking at more maybe the long term, or maybe just a few different variables that maybe we can't consider as much. That's less concrete. Maybe you can share, what's kind of your investment criteria? What do you look for in a winning startup in India to invest in?
Well, let me first put a rain check. So there's not too many winning startups yet. There's some bets right now, but so because of my technology background, I'm still fascinated by something that is disruptive, primarily. but I've also learned to calibrate that with an realistic expectation of market. So in India, if there is a startup which is doing something which is completely leading edge disruption, then building the market from India or capturing the market from India or a new segment is very, very, very hard. Okay. So what we look for is something that is disrupting existing markets and existing workflows, and basically allows the customer to shift from an existing cost or existing use case into a more efficient use case, either through some smart integration or through some smart automation or through some smart, technology solutions. So mobility could be a technology solution, or integration with two or three different products. RPA could be an interesting solution, or some kind of AI or OCR could be an interesting solution. So companies who come, or startups who are trying to solve a problem where people are already spending money, and then they want to make sure that part of their spends can come to these SaaS platforms or digital platforms, but which disrupts their existing paper-based workflows or offline workflows. Those are the things that I really get interested about. And then if I really look at what is the potential size of the market. One of the lessons that I had learned very early on working for Adobe was that markets that don't exist cannot be measured. Okay. So a lot of the time people will come and talk about new market, but there's no question of figuring out what the market size is. You could be as wrong or as right as anybody else. But where there is an existing market, where we know that there is a certain business that is spending so much money, then I'm much more comfortable saying, okay, yes, we could then shift over time. This will shift online, and then of course there is a team. There is the passion of the founder. Is the founding team stable in their own kind of relationship? Do they have hard? Do they have easy ways of communicating hard questions? Sometimes the founding team is very comfortable when things are good, but not so comfortable when things are not so good. Okay, so do they have those? I heard somewhere level 4 questions or level 4 discussions amongst themselves. Do they take responsibility and stuff like that? So once I'm convinced that this looks okay, then yeah, I will make a small investment. But mostly spend a lot of my time trying to make sure that they can get the advantage of my thinking and my experience, and get into the early stage prototype and go to a Series A kind of round, bigger round.
Can you share some examples of some maybe companies you've invested in or you've seen that are kind of this that you as examples of what are disrupting a certain market?
Sure. So one of the startups is in call management, IVR, cloud-based IVR, and self bootstrapped, like might be 6 years now. Now they have reached about $3 million of revenue with about 6,000 users. Very passionate founders, very nice team, execute really, really well. And actually, they're seeing a little headwind with the current COVID situation, because work from home requires that. But also seeing that some of the customers are having a revenue challenge, and therefore the revenue has a dip from some extent. So I think that has been a really nice space. I was working with a team that was doing mortgage property title search kind of automation. So when you do a mortgage plan, you need to see whether the mortgage property has a clear title, and all the clearances, the legal clearances, the government clearances are all in place. There's no legal kind of challenges or cases behind you. You have to check into multiple places, and they use data very, very smartly, scrub data from many places, and built a very nice system which allows a bank or a mortgage provider to quickly go and underwrite a property mortgage. So that looks very interesting, very large opportunity there. In these times, there is all the real estate has gone off the curve. So, you can't visit any real estate property for selling. And one of the startups I was working was working with a 3D virtual walkthrough, but then they added a Zoom type of audio call to a 3D virtual walkthrough. So now property agents and buyers and sellers, they can all be in the same room. They can all be talking to each other and seeing the 3D walkthrough together, pretty much like what we are doing on a Zoom call. So Zoom for real estate. That sounds very interesting to me. So we invested a little bit into those people. There was an educational startup that was doing a peer-to-peer learning. They now have close to 5 million users on that platform. It looks very interesting, and now we have to monetize it and see how to monetize it.
Really cool. And kind of switching gears, what is the most reason? Like, what's the most common reason you would turn down an offer to invest in a startup company? So why are you rejecting deals?
Most common reason I have at least found is where the founders have not really done a good research on the what the pain points of the customer are. They haven't talked to many customers, or they haven't really spoken to any customer for that matter. It's more like my gut feel that this will work rather than I went and talked to my customer and said, hey, if I build this out, will you use it? So if customers can give you early feedback, then the products are more aligned to the need. Of course, there will be people who will be visionary in terms of where it would go to, but that would be my most top reason for saying, look, you don't have enough customer data or customer insight into what you're doing. So let's go and go talk to 10 customers and let's see what they really need. Because finally, at the end of the day, the customer has to say, yeah, I need this. Uh, the other reason would be that a lot of the times in India, many of the founders, they come up with a feature rather than the product. So they will solve a little problem, and yes, it's a very smart solution to a problem, but you have a hard time figuring out how and why it becomes a product. To become a product, then it must meet the customer's expectation of integration with other products, workflow, which can be used day in and day out. It's a critical pain point or not. So it's just that they've just thought of a trick or a gizmo or some kind of one thought rather than I'm building a suite of workflows that will really mature into a product over time. So those are the top two reasons in my experience.
Makes sense. And then within your existing portfolio of SaaS companies, I know you said it's still quite early in terms of your bets to see where they've gone, but I'm assuming some have different levels of growth and success. You've had one exit. Are you able to pinpoint and share what differentiates the top performing companies from the others? Whether is it the product, is it the market that they just kind of got lucky in, is it the team or something else? I don't know if there's certain factors that you can kind of say, hey, like that you synthesize between different businesses that you can have that kind of formula of what would lead to a better company.
I, I I would think of it two different ways. I think the first is execution. So the company that is doing the best is executing brilliantly. So they have a extremely efficient marketing machine setup, automation to figure out, and metrics on every little stage of the product, so they can go from a inquiry call to closure in 3 days time, and they're very very efficiently set up for that. And then passionately focused about customer success. So just the execution machinery is very very nicely set up. The other one which is doing well is because of the innovation power. So this innovation power, and they're dealing with not too much of competition in what their competition is paper based, for example. So by making this disruptive innovation, they're getting an advantage of everybody is interested in their product. So I think those two, either if you are in a very highly competitive space, then your execution needs to be top class, and if you are in a validated innovative space, then I think you're a little better off.
Got it. So if you would rank it, so execution, your level of execution, how the level of how you perform in executing your day to day. Two is like very focused on customer support and what the customers are saying and trying to improve a better product. And then three, obviously, if you're in the right market, it just makes everything smooth, like right place, right time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, makes sense.
Absolutely agree on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So hypothetical kind of question here. You have $1,000. You are looking to build an MVP on a new startup. I don't know if you see this with your companies or who've come to you with very little money and starting bootstrapping their company. Where do you invest that $1,000?
Ah,
How
probably.
do you get the most out of
No,
that? It's
I
very
think
limited, right? But it forces a kind of
yeah,
constraint to think where to.
I would suggest or recommend that you spend 500 $600 from that budget and go and talk to 10 customers and say, look, if I build you this, and maybe create a mock-up and say, look, if I build you this, would you buy? Would you use it? Would it be useful to you? Would you pay for it? And if some people said yes, we will pay for it, then you kind of spend the rest of the money to quickly stitch together a working kind of MVP and show it to them and say, look, is this what you wanted to build? And if they say yes, then say, okay, can you give me some money? I'll go and build it out for you. So you use that $1,000 to kind of get a customer to kind of pay you for what the product might be.
Got it. So what would you build, like a
Does that make
landing
sense?
page, a website, and then maybe some tools to make some calls and lead generation, or is that what you're saying?
Something, some workflow, critical workflow that kind of makes the person that say, look, I will pay for that. Yeah, this if you do that, then I'll pay for that.
And but the thing is, what happens is people will say, "I'll pay for it," but then when it comes to it, are they going to actually pull out their their credit card. So how do you validate up to the point of they actually, take out their card and pay for it?
There you have to kind of trust who you're talking to and whether you have kind of a good relationship where, you know that if you demonstrated whatever he has committed to or she has committed to, they will keep their commitments. Sometimes it may happen that they may not, but that's okay. You know that they were ready to pay for that. So it's worthwhile.
So kind of just last question from my side. What are you most excited about or curious about at the moment? What are you working on? What's your plan? Where are you focusing on, 2020?
So 2020, of course, is a kind of a funny year. We need to first focus on survival. So we're kind of all trying to survive, and we're all trying to be mentally agile and not get sick mentally from all these lockdowns and all the negative news that we are hearing all the time. But I think as the big trends that I see are cloud computing. People are moving to the cloud, telecom, more and more telecom and conferencing, for example, and then more and more collaboration happening, and perhaps that will lead to a lot of digital marketing tools required. So as more people come on board and they start to fill back the revenue kind of, they start investing in more marketing. So some ideas around digital marketing I'm playing around with and say, okay, how could we offer people a way to scale digital marketing without having to go through the top platforms and pay them a lot of money? Those are the things I would say I'm really excited about. Provided we find a good, reasonable vaccine or a good, reasonable medicine to our current problems.
Sure. If not, then that now becomes your 2021 or future plan, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, Arvind, so much for joining us today. That was, I think, super helpful to our audience. A lot of good insights. Where can people learn more about you or get in touch with you if they have any more questions?
Thanks again, Akhil. We usually they can go to my LinkedIn profile. It's pretty savvy on LinkedIn, respond pretty quickly, and then I use Twitter a lot, so they can follow me on Twitter. And I'm pretty effective. I can respond very quickly on Twitter and see what's happening or not. But yeah, between LinkedIn and Twitter, I spend most of my digital time, and of course they can email me anytime as well.
Okay, awesome. So we'll put those links to your LinkedIn and Twitter profile on the show notes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Arvind, feel free to connect with him as well.
Absolutely, it would be a pleasure.
Thank you so much again, Arvind. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you all for listening in to today's episode. Don't forget to join us for another episode where we interview top leaders and experts in the business and SaaS industry. If you enjoyed this episode, I ask that you please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. That would be really, really appreciated. Otherwise, if you have any feedback, suggestions, or improvements for this podcast, please feel free to send it directly to me on our website at horizoncapital.com, or you can just tweet me at Akhil Jabbar. Thanks again, and hope to see you guys on the next episode.